Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm pleased to present the 2006 Chateau Palmer. So Chateau Palmer is a wine, a third growth wine in the 1855 classification system from the Margaux region. Arguably, most people think it's the second best wine produced in the Margaux region after Chateau Margaux, and many people believe it is the quality of the wine and the price obviously that it commands is much higher than a third growth. So if we were to reclassify today, it'd be much higher. And I'll kind of explain through the history why it was a third growth at that time and the historical reasons for that. Chateau Palmer was once part of a bigger estate, which was Chateau Desmirail. So at that point, there was a split in terms of I guess there's the death, and the heirs split the kind of winery, and 50 hectares went to the Gascq family. And the wine being produced was then called Château de Gascq, and it was actually served to the court of Versailles under Louis XV. So I guess a side note is that probably Desmirail is holding some very good vineyards, because that actually, everything came from the Chateau Desmirail vineyard site. In 1814, the widow of the final Gascq heir sold the property to Major General Charles Palmer, and I guess he was a retired military, person, and he was a retired military general, and Palmer invested in the property with his own money. But in 1831, he actually extended the estate to about 163 hectares, of which 82 hectares were under vine. But in 1840, Palmer had some economic difficulties, and then he would have to kind of sell his estate in 1843 to Françoise-Marie Bergerac. And unfortunately, so there's a couple of things. So if you remember, the 1855 classification system, that's when, there's a mark in time where they had all the judging of all the wine. So in 1840, they had a change in ownership. That's only 15 years after the judging. So that was one strike against Chateau Palmer. The second was that from 1844 onwards, there was a mold called oidium that affected the entire Bordeaux. So that was also a second strike against Chateau Palmer. And then in 1853, which is only 2 years before the classification system was out, it was sold again to the Perrier brothers, who were kind of rivals at that time of the Rothschilds. They did kind of have to face some difficult times, and they in fact replanted the whole vineyard in 1858. So you can see at that time that's a very, it's an arbitrary time in history, 1855, but it just happened at that time. They had change of ownership, odium, and they had to replant the whole vineyard. So a lot of things were against them. So arguably that explains why they're a third growth, and they probably should be higher up, if not for all these other kind of weird factors that came into play at that time. The Perrier family rebuilt the winery, invested in it, replanted the vines, and by 1870 they had extended it to 177 acres, of which 109 acres were under vine. And then the Society of Perrier was formed in 1889 and remained owner, but again, more difficult economic times, World War I, the Great Depression, and then they had to sell off the winery in 1938 to a syndicate of some it's called the Société Civile de Château Palmer, which consists of some major families, the Sichel, the Ginestet, the Mialhe and the Mähler-Besse family. And I think right now the Sichel and the Mähler-Besse family still remain majority owners of the estate. There's like 20 other shareholders, but most of the shares are in their name. It should also be noted that before World War II, Chateau Palmer also bought Château Desmirail, which is also a third growth wine. And of course, that's why we don't have now
vines anymore because a couple of them have been bought out or kind of associated with others, so you don't see Desmirail anymore. Chateau Palmer is located in the Cantonette region of Margaux, and most of the plots are situated on the plateau of Margaux, which is arguably the best terroir for, I guess, Margaux, the Margaux region. But those 30 hectares of vines were not, which are comprised of gravel, sand, and clay soils, were not part of the estate in 1855. So again, this is the explanation. Why is Chateau Palmer not higher rated? How could that be? Couple of reasons. One, they had an ownership change right before the classification system was judged. Two, they had some mold that came around that affected most Bordeaux wineries, but they had to replant essentially their whole winery. And three, many of the plots that they have, the best plots they have today, were not part of the estate in 1855. So that's the kind of the rationale why it's improved so much since 1855. They've continued to make great changes and strides in the winery. In 2004, management was turned over to Thomas Duroux, who is the former winemaker of Ornellaia. In 1995, Chateau Palmer redid the whole vat room. They put in 42 temperature-controlled stainless steel vats, and then they subsequently also refurbished the winery again in 2005. So they've had consistently upgrading to the facilities, and they do now have enough vats where they do plot-by-plot vinification. In total, they now have about 66 hectares under vine, of which is planted 47% Merlot, for 47% Cabernet Sauvignon, and then a 6% of Petit Verdot, with an average age of 38 years for the vines. They formerly did have some Cabernet Franc, particularly in their alter ego, but they've kind of started to go away from that. Prior to 2012, there was a small parcel of vines inside the Chateau Palmer vineyards that belonged to another estate called Chateau Vincent, which I've never heard of. Between the 1960s and about 2012, there was a contract between Chateau Vincent, the owners of Chateau Vincent, and Chateau Palmer, where Chateau Palmer would kind of take care of all the vines of Chateau Vincent, but in return give back 40% of the kind of grapes or the harvest to them from their vineyards. That ended in 2012. So again, all that was added back into Chateau Palmer's hands, and so they're going to have better quality wines and also more wines. In 2014, they became 100% biodynamic farming, and in 2017 they were certified 100% biodynamic. The sorting of Chateau Palmer takes place over a number of times. They sort in the vineyard, and then they use optical sorting also for the grapes. The fermentation takes place in the controlled stainless steel vats, somewhere between 40 to 50 something like that. They're all in different ranges of sizes, and then they can be done by parcel by grape variety. So that's again a huge advantage. Malolactic fermentation occurs in barrel, and Chateau Palmer averages about 50 to 70% new French oak barrels for the first 12 months, and then 40% of the wine is then transferred to large oak barrels for the remainder of the aging, which is about 18 to 20 months. Since 1998, Chateau Palmer has been making a second label, not a second wine. So the difference is that it's not like they use the best grapes in Chateau Palmer and then they use the lousier grapes in alter ego. It's a totally separate wine. That's how they feel about it. It's selected from the same quality of terroir, but it's just different winemaking techniques and different proportions of the grape variety. So they don't see it as a lesser wine. They see it as a different wine. And so that's kind of interesting because the price point is quite different. So in a way, you're getting something that the winery itself doesn't think it's that under that low price. So that's why I think Alter Ego is such a value wine, because its price, at least in some vintages, I've got it as 1/8 of the price of Chateau Palmer. Again, typically what I say is that if we have these second wines or second labels and they're priced at 1/3 or more of the price of the Grand Cru wine, you're probably getting a pretty good deal because the quality is there still. And particularly with Alter Ego Palmer, because Palmer now is so expensive, it's I think a really good deal, and probably people will start to understand this, and the price of Alter Ego will start to continue to appreciate. About 40% of the estate's production is now sold as Alter Ego de Palmer. So that has significantly decreased the amount of Chateau Palmer since 1988. So previously, there's almost like 20,000 cases produced of Chateau Palmer. Now it's about half of that, maybe 12,000 at most, and then the rest is another 10,000 cases of Alter Ego. So that's probably also the reason why it's more a higher price. You get less selection of it, and the quality is better. So that explains a lot about why this price has escalated so much. The vineyard is planted 47% Merlot, 47% Cabernet Sauvignon, 6% Petit Verdot. What does it taste like? So I'm just going to read a descriptor that people say about it, but I'm going to give you my own things, my own views of this. It's supposed to have complex aromatics with spice, truffle, violets, spring flowers, earth, and leather scents. It's supposed to be full-bodied and rich, and it personifies the elegance of Bordeaux. So how I feel about Chateau Palmer is, to me, it's almost a blend or a mixture between Chateau Margaux and Livre La Casse. And what I mean by that is Chateau Margaux has got that elegance, that softness. Livre La Casse has got that structure and kind of strength. So to me, it's a very strong wine for Margaux, but of course, very still elegant wine for St. Julien. So that's kind of how I feel about Chateau Palmer, and that's why I think it's so popular, because a lot of people like a little bit heavier style. Chateau Margaux can be quite subtle and quite elegant, and some people might find it a little bit light in terms of the taste. So the more popular palate, commonly right now, the palate is more, the North American palate likes a much heavier, robust wine. They like Rhone wines, they like American wines, they like wines like Livre La Casse, Pauillac wines. So that's why I think Palmer does so well, because it's got the elegance of of the Margaux region, but it's got the power. So of the Margaux region wines, I would say it's one of the more powerful, but it's still very characteristically Margaux in terms of it's very fragrant. It's got that chocolatey aftertaste and that very soft silkiness in the aftertaste, which I don't think you find in other left bank regions. So let's taste this wine. This is the 2006 vintage. So 2006 would be what they call a kind of not the best vintage, but not a really bad vintage. It was just the weather was choppy, but they still produced good wines. And Margaux region wines actually do fairly well in kind of what we call off vintages. This is not really a bad vintage. It was just not the best vintage. And so I think Margaux wines do quite well in this. They are picked, the grapes are picked fairly early. And so in this type of vintage, I think it did okay. It didn't really affect it that much. It is 44% Merlot, 56% Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's Cabernet Sauvignon dominant in this year. And I find in general 2006 and 2008 wines are drinking very well right now. They are hitting their peak years, but they are not by any stretch of the imagination light or past their prime. I think they're just coming into their peak years, and delicious drinking wines. They're not really wines that you can make a lot of money on, but they're delicious for drinking. So I would drink them up if you can get the right price for them.
So this wine has been open now for a day. I did have it with one of my viewers and subscribers at Chop Steakhouse in Richmond with a steak, and so it was a nice pairing. And now I'm just having it the next day. So let's take a smell and a taste. So on the smell, very aromatic. I think fairly typical of Bordeaux, of Margaux. It's got that floral component, like violets, carnations, a little bit of anise, and a little bit of dark fruit, and a little bit of oak also. So very fragrant. This is fairly, to me, quite characteristic of Margaux. This is not surprising in terms of the smell. It does have a little bit of chalkiness to it also. So what I love about Palmer is it's got that intensity of flavor, but it's always very smooth and silky. Really, this wine, if you drink it, this is what you mean by silky aftertaste. It's really soft on the palate. I don't know how you describe it, because sometimes you'll have wines that are very grainy and very rough. This is it just like coats your palate like milk chocolate. That's Chateau Margaux does this also, but Chateau Palmer does this also, and I think even more so than Chateau Margaux. So that to me is the striking characteristic of this wine. Of course, it's got nice dark fruit, dark berries like black currants, black plums, blackberries, but the underlying kind of aftertaste is really that silky chocolatiness, but also good tannin structure, good acidity, good strength. And again, that's what I think. It's a little bit stronger on the taste profile and the tannic structure than Chateau Margaux. I think it's more structured than Chateau Margaux. And so, again, for people that like a wine like Chateau, like Liévin-Lacasse, I think you'll prefer this wine to Chateau Margaux. It's very structured and strong in terms of its, it's much more bold than Chateau Margaux, even though it is a Margaux region wine. A lot of chocolate on this. I can't really get that out of my mind. It's a lot of chocolate. On the taste, it's dark chocolate, but on the palate, it's milk chocolate. And good tannin structure, good strength. This wine is drinking at its prime right now. I would decant it. We did decant it, so this has been back in the bottle, so it's very well aerated. 2 to 4 hours, nice decant on this. Of course, this can go another 5-8 years, but I don't think it's necessary. It's drinking beautifully right now. This is how it should drink, I think. It's got a nice structure. Good wine. I don't think it's the best example of Chateau Palmer I've had, but there are really not really many bad examples of Chateau Palmer. I think in the 2000s and afterwards, I don't think there's many bad Chateau Palmers. So very, very good wine in terms of the quality and consistency. Never really that bad. I think if you go backwards, you can have more hits and misses, but 2000 onwards, I don't see many issues with many Chateau Palmers. They're all very, very nice. It's just the degree of how nice they are and how structured they are and how long you want to kind of keep them. My rating of this wine is 93 points. Really nice wine. Enjoyed it. Had many bottles with my friends. I don't think anyone has not enjoyed it. And it's a beautiful bottle to drink. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, happy drinking.